Thank you for joining us, everybody. It's 6 p.m. We're going to give it just a minute to see a few additional people will join us, and we'll get started with the presentation at exactly 6:02. Thank you. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Good evening, all. Thank you for joining us for this virtual public meeting to learn and provide feedback on the ongoing Stormwater Master Plan for the City of Glendale. This is the second of two virtual public meetings. The first public meeting was held last week on Wednesday, May 25th, 2022, at the same time, 6 p.m. to 7:30. The information presented at this meeting will be similar to that presented previously. There are two meetings in order to provide residents the options for attendance. However, please do note that questions that were posed in the first session may differ from those that are posed in this session, and for that reason, we are going to record and make available both sessions of the recording. This is the final meeting associated with developing the Stormwater Master Planning document. The meeting will be recorded and will also be available from the city's website to view later. I would like to acknowledge representatives from the City of Glendale Administration, Public Works, the elected officials, as well as your city engineer, Lockmiller Group. Specifically, we'd like to thank the Mayor, Mr. Mike Wilcox, the City Administrator, Mr. Benjamin DeClue, the Superintendent, Mr. Terry Jones, the Aldermen and Alderwomen, Paul Ritger, Lisa Kapil-Kashi, Aaron Newman, Sarah Vitali, Rich Fanning, Barry Lane, for Ward 2 and 3 respectively, as well as the residents of the City of Glendale. The residents of the City of Glendale have actively participated in this process of developing the Stormwater Master Plan. And for that, we are very grateful. With Lockmiller Group, the city engineer, I would like to introduce Mr. Scott J. Smith, who actively participates in board of aldermen and women meetings and provides updates for all the civil engineering projects that Lockmiller is assisting the city with, including this Stormwater Master Plan. My name is Laura Wirigi-Reitler. I serve as the project manager. Ms. Alison Mannion, the project engineer whom you have likely talked to in person, over the phone or email over the course of the project, is also here with us today and will be presenting on specifics of the plan. We will move by providing a presentation overview. The presentation will be completed in 3 sections, which include 1, defining the Stormwater Master Plan, what it is not, and what it is for. Then we will go ahead and define the Stormwater Master Plan process and review that. And then we will present the draft project recommendations that have been developed over the last few months. I will lead the first section of the presentation, and Ms. Alison Mannion will lead the second and third part of the presentation. There will be a live question and answer session. This will be held after each section outlined. Since this meeting is being held over Zoom, we will review a few instructions to help residents interact with the engineer and the city as it relates to the virtual platform. We'll also set some ground rules. This will help us assist us in covering the material we have prepared, as well as be respectful of everyone's time this evening. Let us review the Zoom resident interface. You may have noticed that you are in a listen and view mode. This means that while you can hear and see the presenter or panelist, which includes the engineer and the city staff, we cannot hear or see you. We do want to hear from you. Residents will be able to type in their questions at any time during the presentation. To do this, we ask that you use the Q&A button tab. You may wiggle your mouse or tap on your screen. When you do this, a menu bar will appear at the bottom of the screen as shown. And by selecting the Q&A button, you can type in your question or comment. Please only use the Q&A feature specifically to type in questions. The chat box will not be monitored during the presentation, and therefore, if you ask your question over the chat box, there's a chance that it will not be answered immediately. However, it may be followed up after the meeting. Also, please note that any messages on the chat box can be viewed by everyone, unless the host and panelists are specifically selected. Questions will be answered by the presenter or appropriately deferred to a panelist during the Q&A session only. To be respectful of everyone's time, we please ask that questions be directly related to the Stormwater Master Plan and the part of the presentation in session. Questions related to specific properties will not be answered in the live Q&A and will be followed up on and directed to the appropriate panelists. Preference will be given to questions that apply to multiple residents or properties. Individual property questions may also be answered after the meeting if there is sufficient time. Contact information will be provided at the end of the presentations. Residents may also direct their questions to specific members of the panel, that is, city staff or aldermen and women. We do, however, ask that please the questions be related only to the Stormwater Master Plan. Okay, so what is a Stormwater Master Plan? In this case, it's not always a document, but this is a document that details procedures used to evaluate the drainage infrastructure and natural conveyance systems of a city and outlines a systematic approach to be able to address the deficiencies. Drainage infrastructure may include pipe sewer networks. These are usually underground piping and inlets that are used to intercept flow, improved concrete channels, as well as regional storage basins. The drainage infrastructure for the city of Glendale is owned by the Metropolitan Sewer District. Natural conveyance systems also make up the drainage infrastructure. These include drainage ditches, creeks, and low impact development best management practices, which are usually, for example, rain gardens and some streetscaping. The Stormwater Master Plan is aimed at identifying, prioritizing, and guiding project implementation strategies for stormwater-related capital improvement projects. You may usually use here the acronym CIP, that refers to capital improvement projects. So specifically, it will define or help recommend capital improvement projects for the city of Glendale to improve the stormwater system. The images shown above were shared by residents of Glendale during the data collection and assessment phase. These images are evidence of deficiencies in the stormwater management. As we will later review in projects, it is interesting to note the correlation between where these events took place or where the pictures were taken or observed and the location of the proposed or recommended project recommendations. So continuing what a stormwater master plan is, what does it actually do? One, it identifies the needs required to manage surface runoff, convey it through natural and built infrastructure, and discharge it safely back to the rivers and creeks. The city of Glendale is an MS4 as a core permittee with MSD. MS4 stands for Municipal Separate Sewer System. That means that for the city of Glendale, the stormwater and the sanitary systems are separate. Since the city of Glendale is a core permittee within MSD's NPDES permit, NPDES stands for National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit with the Department of Natural Resources, then there are some requirements that the city has to meet in order to remain a core permittee with MSD. This means that ultimately where the city discharges into a regulated system, discharge at that point is monitored to meet requirements of the Clean Water Act. MSD therefore cooperates with its core permittees to meet its requirements and manage stormwater runoff. Stormwater master plans also appraise the severity of storms and floods and how they may impact life, property, as well as daily activities of a community. It presents mitigation measures that are feasible and applicable to addressing water quality, volume control, and a reduction in erosion by providing channel protection or stream stabilization. As we mentioned earlier, it will prioritize recommendations of the capital improvement plan through benefit cost analysis or other measures such as budget or available funding. Stormwater master plans provide a pragmatic approach to address aging infrastructure. For example, by replacing infrastructure that is beyond its useful life, address physical condition of the stormwater system, for example, by fixing broken pipes or outfalls, and then also addresses capacity issues, which are usually addressed by maybe upsizing the pipes or building additional storm sewer and inlets. While the city of Glendale is considered a fully developed residential community, there is still development through land use that changes the surface. For example, infill projects may create additional impervious area, and by creating additional impervious areas, then increase the stormwater runoff and change the watershed characteristics. Lastly, it identifies funding options for implementation. So the next question we'd like to answer is, what makes a stormwater project viable such that it can be included in the stormwater master plan? So for a project to be considered, it addresses the following. One, stormwater or flooding is having an adverse impact to public safety. It results in impeding access to community amenities, emergency routes, hospitals, school bus routes. Then when stormwater runoff results in those activities or impedes access for the community to do its daily activities, a project that would be able to remedy that then qualifies or gets higher points for it to be able to be included in the stormwater master plan. Then the other thing that we look at is if the problems of stormwater runoff resulted from construction of a public project, as well as, for example, upstream development that may be having negative impact to downstream properties. Another thing we will look at is if it affects or has impact to more than one property owner. Since we have reviewed what a stormwater master plan is, it is also important to review what a stormwater master plan is not, or projects that would generally not qualify to be included in the stormwater master plan. And while we say that the projects or constructable projects are not included in the stormwater master plan, there is still some guidance that may be given to residents and the city to be able to address this. So for one, private property with isolated stormwater problems. For example, it does not specifically respond or provide for projects that address yard ponding at one property. If you're having, for example, basement foundation cracks, though during wet weather, you might see more water come through your foundation, the Stormwater Master Plan would not specifically call for a project that comes and does home improvement projects or beautification projects at a specific property. However, it is worth noting that the projects that are recommended, when implemented, would reduce or mitigate impact to specific properties. The other thing is that it does not include driveway, street, or sidewalk improvement projects. And this is mostly because there are other mechanisms through which these projects can be completed outside of a stormwater master plan. And when Alison discusses the projects later, some of these she will discuss, for example, LPA projects. And these projects can usually be coordinated together with the stormwater master plan. LPA stands for Local Public Agency. The other thing that a stormwater master plan will not do is that it will not guarantee that you will not get any flooding. Because like we all know, for example, a 500-year flood may occur tomorrow, but it's not possible, for example, it would be very expensive to have to design everything with a level of service of a 500-year flood because it is quite infrequent. So a stormwater master plan will look at a pragmatic approach to address stormwater issues so that we do not have frequent flooding in the neighborhood. Next, we will discuss why a stormwater master plan is needed. One, risk management. Stormwater runoff does present risk to property and life. And one of the hardest things, the hard thing about not having a stormwater master plan is not being able to assess that risk. The stormwater master planning process through a preliminary watershed analysis helps evaluate the relative level of risk from flooding a community may face. So for example, by collecting data, we can determine, for example, how often we get, what is really, what does a 2-year flood do? What does a high intensity, short duration flood do in a community? What does a 100-year flood do? So what risk are you based on where your property is located? Because you will notice as we look at property to property or one area to the other, the risk is significantly different from one area to the other. Then the other most important thing about the Stormwater Master Plan is that it makes sure we're prepared. It gets us past the hurdle of identifying, documenting problems, and you might say complaining, and moving us past that hurdle to being prepared to implement solutions. This is especially so when the opportunity for funding occurs. As an example, this specific Stormwater Master Plan is funded through the Metropolitan Sewer District's OMCI program. OMCI stands for Operation, Maintenance, Construction, and Improvement. These projects in the OMCI plan for MSD generally address erosion and flooding. How does this work? MSD has set up a taxing districts within its service areas. The city of Glendale is within the Deer Creek service area. From that service area, MSD levies a tax per property value assessed. And if you'd like to look up the information, for example, for Glendale, and we pulled it up, the information is available online. You'll find like that for residential properties, for every $100 assessed, MSD assesses a tax of $0.066. This money is then available to MSD to complete priority projects. However, this funding is also available for the city to apply for, to be able to complete projects or even it can keep the money to address longer ranged projects. However, it is important to note that the projects must be defined in order to apply for funding. The other funding that has become recently available, and you may have had this over the news, is ARPA, or the American Rescue Plan Act. The American Rescue Plan Act does provide funding for urban stormwater funding, and this actually has came into effect within the last month, so the month of May, and there is funding available from May 16th of this month. Through the Department of Natural Resources, communities can apply for funding to address stormwater issues. One key thing that is mentioned in that is the requirement for a stormwater master plan. So that's why it is important to have a plan in order to be prepared to implement solutions for stormwater. We can move on now to questions. Do we have any questions, Alison?
We do not have any questions at this time, Laura.
Okay, all right then. Then in that case, we will move on to the stormwater master plan process. So this slide is an introduction to the next two sessions that Alison will be leading. And if you look at the graphic represents the roadmap that the city of Glendale has been on in developing the stormwater master plan. So how did this come by? So as the city engineer, Lockmiller, the city met to review stormwater issues and determined to move ahead and figure out if it was possible to fund a stormwater master plan using MSD's OMCI program. This included Lockmiller developing a scope and fee and defining what the stormwater master plan would include and submitting it to the MSD Deer Creek Watershed Committee for review. The Deer Creek Watershed did approve the scope of work and fee, and that was presented to the MSD board. Once introduced to the board, the following month, I believe it was introduced in June of 2021, and in July 8th of 2021, the board approved and allowed for an ordinance to be set up where the city of Glendale could enter into an agreement with MSD in order to be reimbursed for stormwater spending. Once that approval was provided by MSD, Glendale went ahead and provided notice to proceed to Lockmiller Group in October of 2021. At that time, we started with the process of data collection and mapping. We did a lot of public outreach and met with a pilot project where actually active residents had actually spoken to the city, specifically to the superintendent. And we took that area, which is the lower Algonquin area, visited the site, and were able to test some of the procedures we will be going through in developing the stormwater master plan. Once you completed getting data collection, the next step was problem identification, specific issues with stormwater, and then assessing or completing watershed and hydraulic analysis to be able to review the needs assessment. We are currently in the draft recommendation. So if we've collected data and reviewed it and analyzed it, we developed specific projects to address the issues that we found in the field. And that also includes this particular public meeting. Once this is done, we will get all the feedback that we receive from the municipality and the community, and we'll use it to develop a final report. This final report can then be used to source funding and develop an implementation plan for the solutions that are recommended. And with that, I will let Alison proceed, and she will discuss each of those steps specifically. Alison?
Thank you, Laura.
You're welcome.
As Laura just went over, the first step was data collection and mapping. So before we dive into this exhibit, I want to go over a few things on the screen. The purple outline you can see on this exhibit, those are the Glendale city limits, and the cities surrounding Glendale are also labeled. And you'll see this reoccurring on a lot of the exhibits. This is the shape of Glendale when you see that purple outline. And so we started by looking at the city of Glendale and where the stormwater goes. So within the city, the stormwater goes to 3 main creeks, and those are Rock Hill Creek, Feeder Creek for Worsen Woods Creek, and Shady Grove Creek. And as let's see, the pink area, all the stormwater in that area eventually drains to Rock Hill Creek through the network of storm sewers and channels. And in the blue area, the blue watershed, the stormwater in that area drains to the Feeder Creek for Worsen Woods Creek, and for the yellow, that's to Shady Grove Creek. As you can see, these shapes do not necessarily obey political boundaries, and stormwater often does not. Stormwater flows from one city to another. There's stormwater that flows into Glendale and out of Glendale into neighboring cities. And that's what's nice about MSD owning the infrastructure, all the storm sewers in the area, is that they can complete any projects that would be across municipalities. MSD has the authority to complete those projects. And then you can see at the bottom of Glendale in the southern end, the bottom of the exhibit, the southern end of Glendale, that those areas actually flow to Gravois Creek. So that flows out of the city of Glendale. And the area that we started, as Laura stated earlier, was in the lower Algonquin area, which is in the Shady Grove Creek drainage area. So once we had done our mapping, we had delineated the watersheds and sub-watersheds. We started looking at where there were problems in the city of Glendale. And we targeted properties to go out and look at in the field. And we did this 2 ways. We looked at a history of MSD complaint data, so recorded complaints through MSD, and areas of known issues to city administration. And through those, certain properties throughout the city were targeted, and those are highlighted on the map over here. And the different colors just show the progress. This is while we were in the middle of our field work. And so you might have seen us out in the field and talked to us when we were out there. I might have talked to you on the phone or via email. And a lot of you sent some pictures and videos, and those are incorporated into this. Some of those are incorporated into this presentation as well. And also with, while we were out there, if you did see us out in the field, we had iPads and we were collecting data in a online map, which I'm pulling up right now. And so to start right here, to kind of let you get your bearings, this is the lower Algonquin area. This, looking at East Essex and Algonquin and Devon Road right here, Willow Oak Lane. And when we were out there, we were collecting some information, which I'll go over here with the next slide. And we were also getting some photos and videos from the homeowners in the area sent. So any information that you sent in, any comments or photos or videos, those are all stored in our mapping system. And so this is just to let you know, this is kind of where they all ended up. And so now they're all tied to your parcel in the map, as well as all the data that we collected out in the field. So a few examples of don't know if you guys can hear that. It's kind of loud. This is an example from the Algonquin area. Property owner sent this in. You can see the roadway is flooded. The culvert is overwhelmed by the stormwater and flowing over the street. And you could see the truck parked in the driveway. The driveway is flooded. The garage is flooded. This property owner's whole property is pretty much flooded at this point. And that's one example of a video a homeowner sent in. Another example, this is along Edwin Avenue, and this is through a backyard. Normally there's a small channel that runs through here, which you can't even see right now. It's so overwhelmed. There's a bridge that goes over the small channel, and it's running just like a river through these backyards. So these are just a couple of examples of some of the issues that Glendale residents are experiencing and some videos that property owners sent in to us. I just wanted to share a few of those just so you can kind of see what we were looking at. And all of, like I said, all of those videos and photos and any other information you sent to us are now stored in this this geodatabase. And while we were out in the field, we were looking for some specific problems. So here's this map of Glendale again, that purple outline, those 3 watersheds, and the colored dots on the map correspond with the problems that we identified out in the field. So we were looking for roadway flooding, main structure building flooding, backyard flooding, basement backups, driveway flooding, sinkholes, storm system deterioration, channel ditch erosion, and other property damage. And like I said, the color of the text corresponds with the color of the data point in our map. And we were also out there taking some photos when we were out in the field as well. And I just kind of want to go over some of the main problems we saw throughout the city. And the first one is roadway flooding. We saw this in several areas where during large rain events, the roadway floods and becomes impassable. And usually this is when there's a culvert where the creek goes under the road and the water rises up so high that it flows over the road. So this photo on the right, this is in the lower Algonquin area, and this is kind of a still photo of that, similar to that video that first video that I showed. And then the photo on the left is on Frederick, and both these areas are when it rains enough, you can't even drive on the street through these areas. And this is a concern of roadway accessibility. Another issue we saw was some main structure building flooding. We saw this in a few different places. This photo on the left is along Parkland, and you can see how high the water is around this house. And they, from this rain event, definitely experienced some main structure building flooding. And then the photo on the right shows some kind of aftermath of some of the things that homeowners have experienced when they've had their house flood due to stormwater. And that's an issue due to safety. The next issue that we saw quite a bit of throughout the city was backyard flooding. So this photo on the left this is taken from West Oak looking up towards Brownell. And this is a river that's flowing from Brownell through between some houses in flooding the backyards along West Oak. Normally there is an inlet, which is one of those square concrete structures that the stormwater goes in either on 1, 2, 3, or 4 sides. I'll show a picture of one in a little bit because I will use that term several times throughout the presentation. But normally there is an inlet sitting in this backyard, and it is completely buried in this stormwater. And this is an issue because it crosses multiple property lines. So as Laura referenced earlier, this would be an issue that would qualify for a stormwater master plan because it involves several different properties. As does this photo on the right along Edwin Avenue. This is the second video I showed. This is a photo of that issue, and it's water running through several backyards, some severe flooding, again, like a safety issue. It was flowing pretty rapidly through those backyards, and again, involves multiple properties, as you can see the fences separating the properties here. And the last issue that we saw quite a bit of was driveway flooding. And this is an issue you need to be able to get into your car and back your car out of your driveway and get into your house from your car when it's raining. And these two photos actually show a few different things there. They do show some roadway flooding, and the roadway in quite a few instances also floods then into the driveway as well. In both of these on Alexandra and Southmoreland, that is what's occurring. Now we went out in the field and collected these, we identified these problems, collected these data points, and we came back to the office and did some analysis. So this exhibit on the left takes all the data points that we collected into the field, all the problems we identified, and it's a map showing the severity of the problems. Where are the problems the most severe? And the darker the red, the more severe the problem. And then the yellow rectangular shapes show where we have recommended projects located throughout the city. And as you can see, most of them are overlapping with some of the more problematic areas of the city. And this photo on the right shows it's the same data, just showing it a little bit different. This exhibit shows which problems we had in the areas of the city. So the black indicates backyard flooding, and the bigger the circle, the more houses experiencing that problem. And then the like I said, black is backyard flooding, the peach is public roadway flooding, the purple is driveway flooding, and those were some of the problems we saw the most throughout Glendale. And you can see in the middle of the circle the number of homes in the area experiencing that problem. Now we can take a quick break and do questions, and then I will start diving into the projects individually. I do see a question here. Are you still collecting videos and photos of street and backyard flooding? Yes. If you have any additional photos or videos that you would like to send in, the last slide of this presentation has our contact information. Again, I'm Allison Mannion. I'd probably be the best person to send it to, but either myself or Laura work to send any information to you. If you have a video file that's larger, we have a Dropbox set up. So yes, please feel free to reach out. Our contact information is also listed in the if you received a letter or an email about this public meeting, our contact information is listed there as well. And then
there's one more question there, Alison. Will the Stormwater Master Plan account for impacts of climate change on flooding severity and frequency?
Yes, and a little bit later in the presentation, I will talk about one of our recommendations being a risk assessment, and that would definitely take those into account, the flooding severity and frequency.
Also, to add on to that on the flooding frequency, it is important to note that so storm sewer infrastructure systems, the pipe networks themselves, are for MSD guidelines and standards are specifically designed for a 15-year or 20-year 15-minute rainfall. Now, in reviewing, for example, the information that we have observed, you will notice as Alison presents later that we are paying attention to short duration, high frequency rainfall as well. So you might have a 2-year flood or a flood that happens more frequently, but flash flooding may be the result of what is causing more impact to the community rather than long duration flooding. So that is something that we will discuss and is considered as well.
And I see one more question. How do you work with the overflow areas with Kirkwood? So I believe this question's asking about the watershed that we drew in that overlaps with the city of Kirkwood. And again, that would be a project that would involve the city of Kirkwood as well as the city of Glendale. That would more than likely be an MSD project because they own infrastructure in both cities. They own the stormwater infrastructure in both cities, and they complete projects across city boundaries all the time. Okay, and with that, I'll move on to the next section of our presentation, the last section. It's the longest section though. So there criteria for capital improvement projects. So as Laura discussed, the projects that we're primarily going to discuss today are capital improvement projects. There are like construction type projects, and in order for those to be completed, they should meet a certain criteria. That's what MSD and the Department of Natural Resources use when determining the feasibility of projects. And one of those is the number of homeowners a project would benefit. Is it going to benefit an entire street or an entire neighborhood, or just one or two houses? The benefit to cost ratio, that again takes the benefit of the project and cost of the project both into account. The safety is obviously a really important priority for the city, and we want to make sure that we're addressing any safety concerns with these projects. Risk to property damage, potential property damage, the severity of the problem, and roadway accessibility. This photo right here, I thought showed a few different criteria. This is a police cruiser that got stuck going down Parkland Avenue a few years ago, and the police car could not continue down the street. Well, this is an issue because if there was an emergency, I'm not sure what the police was going to do, if it was on its way to something or just patrolling, but we need emergency vehicles to be able to reach everybody in the city of Glendale. We also need you to be able to reach your home even when it's raining. And so we need the roadways to be accessible. This is obviously a safety issue, like I said, because we need emergency vehicles to be able to access all parts of Glendale. And there was some property damage going on in this photo as well. So with these stormwater infrastructure projects, they're broken up into 3 types of projects, pretty much just based on how MSD breaks up their projects. And those are improvement to the storm sewer collection system, storage, and stream bank stabilization. And I'm gonna now dive into and give you guys a little bit more information about what each one of these actually means. I'm gonna start with storm sewer collection system. And any project with the storm sewer collection system's purpose is to intercept and convey the stormwater in the city of Glendale. So we want the water. So this photo on the right shows an inlet. So like I said, when I use that term inlet, this is what I'm talking about, that square concrete structure, and it's open either on one side, as this photo shows. It could be open on 2, 3, or 4 sides, or it could be a graded inlet and flush with the ground. And the stormwater goes into the inlets, and then from there, those are the collectors, and then it's conveyed by the storm sewers in channels in the stormwater system. And improvements to these to the storm sewer collection system are needed in instances of flooding, of surcharge sewer system. So if there's not enough capacity in the sewer system to handle the stormwater, and roadway ponding if there's an insufficient collection in the area. So types of work include adding inlets. So adding an additional inlet. So if there's one inlet and really 2 are needed, or if there's not an inlet in that area and an inlet is needed. Increasing pipe sizes. So if the storm sewer does not have sufficient capacity and we need to increase the capacity. Storm sewer extension, and that would be where in areas where we don't really have storm sewers, that we need to extend our existing system to collect stormwater. And interception and diversion, and that would be used in an instance where the storm sewer in one area has less than sufficient capacity, and storm sewer in another area has additional capacity to take on stormwater, and so we would intercept and divert the stormwater from one area to another. The next type of project is storage. And the purpose of these are to attenuate flow, to store flow temporarily. As Laura said, these are particularly used to store high intensity, short duration storms. And there are 2 types. There are above ground and below ground. So this photo on the right shows the installation of some below ground storage. So this is during construction, and when this construction is complete, they will fill this in with backfill and put the roadway back as it was, and you won't actually be able to see that it's there. It is going to be under the roadway or under a yard, and it is fully below ground. And the other type is the above ground, and this is an instance of somewhere in Glendale that has concrete walls. They could have earthen walls as well. But again, both of these types of storage are to temporarily store some stormwater. So it pulls some stormwater out of the system when there's not enough capacity for the amount of stormwater in the existing storm sewers. So it pulls it out, it stores it temporarily, and releases it back into the storm sewers or storm sewer system later on when there is capacity. And the last type of project is stream bank stabilization. And the purpose of these is to stabilize a creek or channel bank that have been eroding. And the methods of these include gaping baskets, riprap, rock lining. This photo shows an area within the city that this channel bank has eroded further and closer to the house structure. And so a main concern here is obviously the safety and property damage potentially caused by this eroding further towards the house structure or a road or something of that sort. So now I'm going to start describing all of the projects. Before I do want to let you guys know that these are recommended projects. Right now, this is a draft phase of the Stormwater Master Plan. Nothing is finalized. Just because I discuss a project does not for sure mean it's going to happen. We are not done coming up with projects. And also some of these projects are shorter term projects, and they can be completed within a much shorter time period, and some are longer term projects. So those have maybe a bit more of a design component, or we will have to seek funding for that project. And to determine the opinions of probable cost for these projects, MSD pay items were used since this is MSD infrastructure. And the projects were broken up into groups. The first tier, they meet all the CIP criteria and all the Stormwater Master Plan criteria discussed on previous slides. The second tier projects are considered for this master plan, but do not necessarily meet all of the criteria, but they do meet some. And projects that were not considered did not meet the Stormwater Master Plan criteria. And here's a list of the first tier projects. And these they're not listed in any particular order, and I'm going to go over the projects in no particular order. These are not prioritized. They will be, but as part of the draft phase, we've not prioritized these projects yet. And these names probably don't mean that much to you. Again, we'll go over them shortly. And the second tier projects are listed on this slide. Again, in no particular order. And the project number at the end, that was just for our identification purpose. Again, that has no weight on the project. Here's a very similar map to one I've already shown, showing you where in the city, where in the city of Glendale these projects are located. And it's the yellow outlines indicating where these projects are located throughout the city. And now here is the first project. This is Edwin Avenue Underground Detention from Sappington Road to South Moreland Avenue. Before I dive in and start discussing this project in detail, I want to go over a few things with everyone, just so you have an idea of what you're looking at. So all the houses are numbered, and then the names are in the street. You can kind of see where we are in the city. And there's a map over here on the left-hand side, lower left-hand corner. And the red shapes show the projects that we are going to be discussing in this presentation. And the yellow highlighted box shows you where in the city we are on this particular exhibit. When you look at the exhibit, the red lines are the sanitary sewer. Those are just there as an FYI. The blue dashed lines are the storm sewer. The blue solid lines are the channels and creeks. And those are going to be reoccurring on most of the exhibits. And then for this project, this is the second video I showed earlier where this channel is completely flooding the backyards along Edwin Avenue. And in order to help attenuate that flow, we are recommending some underground storage, like the photo I showed earlier, up under the parking lot of City Hall that will pull flow out of the system and help attenuate the flow during a large rain event and then let it back into the system. And some underground storage along Southmoreland Avenue is also recommended, as well as an additional inlet. There is, as Laura discussed, a local public agency project to redo the roadway along Southmoreland Avenue, and that is a curb and a paving project. And there will be the purpose is to increase the level of service of this road. So there will likely be some improvements to how this road handles stormwater with this project as well. And then it's also another part that's included is extending the culvert just a little bit. And this project will impact 8 properties, and the total opinion and probable cost is $1.8 million. The next project is Parkland, Elm, and Algonquin Stormwater Storage. So this similarly recommends some underground storage along Parkland, Elm, and this paper street between Algonquin and Devon, as well as between a few of the houses on Parkland. And this area from Cliffside through Algonquin, Devon, up to Parkland and Elm, all along this network of storm sewers, they are experiencing some flooding issues. And the stormwater storage that will help attenuate, will help hold some of the storm, will help store some of the stormwater. That will help that immediate area, and that will help downstream. So all of these areas of recommended storage are going to help this area and also further downstream by not overwhelming the stormwater system downstream. This project will benefit 217 properties and has a opinion of probable cost of $7.4 million. The next project we are discussing is Willow Oak Diversion Sewer. And currently there is a network of storm sewers that goes south kind of parallel to Berry, and they end at a sinkhole between 15 Willow Oak Lane and 6 Kings Pond. And this project is an interception and diversion project. So we are recommending to take the flow of the stormwater out of this system and take it down to Shady Grove Creek. Another option that might be considered during the design phase would be to take it over to the golf course and do add to the storage pond, or look at another pond in the golf course. And this project will benefit 33 properties and has an opinion of probable cost of $5.1 million. Currently, the water from the stormwater going to that sinkhole flows underground through the karst and outlets in a stormwater channel at 6 Devon Road. And that is the erosion photo I showed earlier of the creek bank erosion. And so the Devon Road Creek Stabilization Project is using gabions in place to help stabilize that creek bank right there. And so this would be an example of a short-term project. This channel is eroding closer to the house structure at 6 Devon Road. And a longer-term project that would also help this area is the interception and diversion sewer along Willow Oak. And this project would benefit one property and has a total cost of $10,700. The next project is Idlewild Lane Storm Sewer Relief. The area at Dwyer, Hillard, and Idlewild is flooding at this intersection, and some hydraulic analysis revealed that the storm sewer is undersized in this area. So it is recommended to increase the size of the storm sewer to a 30-inch storm sewer. The shapes, the yellow line shows the storm sewer, the proposed storm sewer, and the shapes underneath it show the either sodding or pavement replacement, in case you're seeing those in the exhibits, and those were used for the cost estimating purposes. This project will benefit 57 properties and has a total cost of $72,000. The next three projects all kind of tie in together. This first one is Juanita Avenue Underground Storage. And this is another underground storage project where it would go under the street along Juanita Avenue. And this would attenuate some of the flow. The storm sewer in this area is undersized, but in order to increase the size of the storm sewer, it would have to go a long ways north through the city of Glendale. So another solution that we came up with would be to attenuate some of the flow, to temporarily store some of the flow out of the storm sewer. And again, this would benefit this area and the area downstream of this project. This project would benefit 27 properties and has a total opinion of probable cost of $929,000. This next project is very similar, Brownell Avenue Underground Storage. And again, they are seeing a lot of flooding in this street, as is Juanita, and the water is flowing over into driveways, into some house structures, into backyards. And in order to help alleviate this problem, some underground storage is recommended. And this would benefit, again, this area as well as the downstream area by storing some of the stormwater and allowing the system to flow at capacity instead of over capacity. This project would benefit 20 properties and has a total cost of $1.9 million. And both the Juanita Avenue Underground Storage and Brownell Avenue Underground Storage will also help this area, which is downstream. So this reach of storm sewer goes to Juanita, and this reach goes up to the Brownell Avenue Underground Storage project. And currently, the backyards along West Oak Drive are being flooded. This is where I showed a photo of earlier, where there is an existing inlet that you could not even see in the photo because it was so flooded. The water was so high in the backyard that it was completely submerging the inlet. So those two upstream projects would benefit this area, as well as this reach of storm sewer was found to be undersized, so it's recommended to increase this to a 42-inch storm sewer, as well as adding a few inlets. And this is the West Oak Drive Storm Sewer Relief. This project would benefit 53 properties and has a total cost of $146,000. Alexandra Avenue Storm Sewer from Sappington Road to Glenway Drive. Along Alexandra, along Alexandra, there's currently no storm sewers as you go west, and then there are none along this part of Sappington. So there's some stormwater from part of the elementary school parking lot and Sappington that flow over and are flowing into the structures of along these first houses along Alexandra Avenue at Sappington. And all the water from there is flowing down to in front of 815 Alexandra Avenue. And the amount of stormwater is overwhelming the inlets that are there right now. They just do not have sufficient capacity to take in all that stormwater. So it is recommended to do a storm sewer extension project and add some inlets in order to capture the stormwater earlier and convey it down Alexandra Avenue, instead of all the storm sewer trying to be captured by I believe there's 2 inlets down along Alexandra. This project would benefit 35 properties and has a total opinion of probable cost of $443,000. This next project is an example of the above ground storage, which is a photo I showed earlier. And this would, again, be to attenuate flow. That's what we're trying to do with all these storage projects. We're just trying to store some of the flow and release it back into the system when there is capacity. So it's not when it's pouring rain, but at a later time when there is availability in the storm sewer to take on that storm water. So this would be along Berrywood Drive. So this is Berrywood West storage. This project would benefit 65 properties and has a total opinion of probable cost of $192,000. And this would benefit this area and also the area downstream, which is getting pretty flooded during rain events. And this next project, Berrywood East, is very similar. This would be an above ground storage project in this 30 Berrywood Drive, which is a parcel owned by the trustees of the neighborhood. So it's not on an individual property. And this would help store some flow, help the downstream area that is getting flooded during rain events. And this project would benefit 63 properties and has a total cost of $147,000. The next project is Glenmore Avenue Stormwater Improvements. Through our hydraulic analysis, it was determined that the storm sewer between Glenmore and Glenbrook is undersized. It's currently a 30-inch storm sewer flowing to a 27-inch storm sewer. So we are recommending increasing the size of the storm sewer to a 30-inch and adding some inlets along the storm sewer to help capture the storm water and capture it efficiently. The houses on the south side of Glenmore Lane are having a lot of backyard flooding issues. So constructing a swale to help direct the stormwater down to where it can be collected, and some underground storage at 1004 Glenmore Lane are also recommended improvements associated with this project. This project would benefit 21 properties and has a total cost of $444,000. Madison Avenue Storm Sewer Extension. There is currently a lot of backyard and main structure flooding along the houses right here along North Berry Road. So this would be to extend the storm sewer and add an additional inlet to capture the flow that's running down between these houses along Monier Place and the water coming down from Manchester Road. This project would benefit 4 properties and has a total cost of $20,000. This last project, we actually grouped a few different projects together because they were so small. The first one is along Brownell Avenue. There are currently inlets along Brownell Avenue, but they're just single inlets, and they, based on the amount of stormwater they're capturing in this location, need to be double inlets. And so that improvement is recommended there. So the street does not flood. The next area is along Glen Vista Place, and there are storm sewer improvements recommended, as well as the addition of an inlet to capture the stormwater that is not being sufficiently captured along Berry, as well as some curbing to help direct the stormwater to the inlets instead of flowing down the driveways in the backyards of the houses along Glen Vista. And the last improvement project, or last part of this project, is at Berry Oaks Drive and North Berry Road. There was a paving project, and the 2 inlets at that intersection were not raised, so it's recommended that those inlets be raised to capture the stormwater as efficiently as possible, as well as some curbing added to direct the stormwater into the inlet and keep it out of the backyard of 1201 North Berry. These projects altogether would benefit 45 properties and have a total opinion of probable cost of $93,000. There are a few MSD projects, or at least there's one MSD project ongoing in the area that is East Essex Avenue, 802, 804 storm sewer, and that's this pink line on the exhibit. And if you live in this area, you might already be aware of this project. It is completing design and going into the easement acquisition period of the project right now. And there are 3 other identified projects by MSD that are currently identified but not funded. So they are not in design or construction. And those are Berry Park Drive Storm Sewer, Nancy Carroll Lane Storm Sewer, and Algonquin Wood Place at Bury Road Storm Sewer. And those are indicated by the green lines on the exhibit. And there are also some non-construction, so like non-CIP type projects that we are recommending as part of the Stormwater Master Plan. The first is a risk assessment and flood mapping, and I'll actually go into a little bit more detail in the next slide about that. The next one is a stormwater ordinance. Currently, I heard from a lot of you when I was out in the field that there are or have been some infill development projects. So an existing lot that has a house structure, and the house structure is either being demolished and a much larger structure built on the same size lot, or an addition to a house or a driveway expansion. All those create more impervious surface. So when it rains, the stormwater can infiltrate anywhere where there's grass or landscaping or gravel or anything like that. But if there's concrete or a roof or any structure like that, the stormwater then has to flow somewhere. So when these infill development projects happen, they create more impervious surface and less area for the stormwater to infiltrate into the ground, and that then it therefore flows into the storm sewer system and is or onto their neighbor's property or something. And the next one, it's not really a project as much as just following the MS4 minimum control measures. So as Laura discussed, the City of Glendale is a co-permittee on MSD's MS4 permit for stormwater. And there are 6 minimum control measures that are involved in this. The first one is public education and outreach, and the next one is public participation. And with those 2, that's what we're doing now. We are you guys are actively participating in the Glendale Stormwater, and you have been throughout the past few months by talking to us when we're in the field and sending in any information that you have, whether that's descriptions or photos or videos. And so that's those 2 we are currently doing. There's a lot of public participation we've seen in the city. The next one is illicit discharge detection and elimination, management of construction site runoff, management of post-construction site runoff of both new development and redevelopment. So that kind of goes back to the infill development that I discussed just a minute ago. And then good housekeeping and municipal operations. So those are things like keeping inlets free and clear of debris, and also educating the public on what they can do to help any problems they're having, such as keeping inlets, removing leaves in the fall that are clogging up inlets, and things like that. And to go back to that first point from my last slide, the risk assessment and flood mapping. So the City of Glendale is actually, it's too small of a geographical area to trigger FEMA flood mapping. However, there is a lot of impervious in the city. It's almost completely residential. There's almost no area in the city that is undeveloped. These light blue shaded areas indicate the floodplains in neighboring cities. And the reason those don't continue on into Glendale is because the City of Glendale is the square miles of Glendale is too small to trigger the FEMA flood mapping. So it's recommended that the city complete a risk assessment and flood mapping to see where we might have some problems along the creeks through Glendale and where there could potentially be future problems. and I touched on this a little bit earlier, but the short-term versus long-term projects, some of these short-term projects like maintenance or the smaller projects like adding an inlet, those are going to be a lot easier to complete. Those have a lot less of a design component. Those can be completed in the shorter term versus the long-term projects. A lot of them I went over are going to be pretty expensive. We are going to seek some funding on some of these projects. These are going to be like a little more permanent projects, and they will have more than likely a significant design component. So the project is just going to take longer to actually be completed. And at this time, we can do questions, and I'm just going to actually click through to the next slide, which has my contact information, Laura's contact information, and Terry Jones, the City of Glendale Superintendent contact information. Following this meeting, if you have anything that you wanted to send to one of us or any follow-up questions, feel free to give us a call or send an email.
Alison?
Yes.
There have been a few questions, and they have been answered in the Q&A. However, we do have some time, so I can run through a few of them, specifically those that address the last two sessions that you have provided. So one of those was, are there many homeowners in Glendale participating in the Deer Creek Watershed Alliance Landscaping Cost Share Program? And we do not specifically have the information on how many are participating. However, because this program can actually assist individual homeowners because it's a small grants MSD program, what we can do is provide information with a link on the Glendale site so that you can receive information as to how to apply for funding for them. And this is because this affects water quality, and they try to stop more or less runoff at the source. And funding for this is about $4,500 to about $6,000 on the program. And you're also able to check on MSD's website whether you qualify for the grant. You do have to attend, I believe, a session, a training information session, where they give you information on how to apply for it. This year's funding, I believe, is already complete, but you can sign up for the following year and be notified when it's open. The next question on that was, for those type of overlapping projects, such as with the street improvements and the underground storage, will timing be coordinated so as to minimize impact on traffic, street usage, and costs? Do you want to take that one, Alison?
Sure. That would be ideal if that's possible. However, if there is a street project that's going to be done in the near future and the project in that area is going to be more long-term, that's certainly something that's going to be looked at. We're not, I don't think the city is going to necessarily hold off on doing certain improvement projects because another one might be done down the road. Again, like if we are seeking funding or going to wait for a few years to complete one of these projects, that they might go ahead and do the roadway improvement project. However, if they can time them, that's certainly something that is taken into account.
Then there is a question which I believe you answered right after it was asked. This is there currently or are there plans to limit percentage of lots that can be impervious surface? Are there other non-reactionary plans to prevent new improved plans from being undersized in a few years as more properties are converted to larger homes? And I believe you answered that when you talked about the infill projects. Paul Rushka also followed up with an answer on how the Architectural Review Board is continuously reviewing guidelines and recommends change to best balance the needs of new homeowners. This also is directed, related to the non-CIP projects that Alison discussed in terms of updating ordinances for the city for development. I wasn't able to listen to the entire presentation. Is there any project to address the flooding on Frederick Lane? And yes, I believe that was also answered by Paul Rodka. Thank you. The project was referenced earlier, and Alison, if you could maybe bring it up for that homeowner if they're with us now, and maybe we could go through it for.
Yeah, along Frederick, there are a couple upstream projects that have storage that will help attenuate the flow along. It's probably gonna make a lot of people dizzy. There are Berrywood West storage and Berrywood East storage. Are both just upstream of Frederick, and so those will help store some of the stormwater in this area and release it back into the system when there's some capacity to take on this stormwater. So I mentioned a few times throughout this presentation that the storage projects benefit that immediate area, but they also benefit the area downstream of the storage as well. And there will be a recording of this. I think Laura might have just said this, a recording of this presentation as well as last week's presentation that are on the Glendale, links are on the Glendale website.
There's a question, actually 2 questions specifically on funding, and we discussed this earlier, but I'll go ahead and answer it. Does Lockmiller Group help Glendale with assessing funding? Yes. We do that not only on the stormwater plan, but on the other civil engineering LPA projects we perform. And we are actually looking to meet with the city to address specifically the ARPA, American Rescue Plan funds, and how that can be applied to stormwater. Like we know, the only way to not get funding is not to apply. But we do help the city to make sure that they are prepared and can apply for that funding. There's a question that came up on the chat. I live on Glenbrook Avenue near an inlet. How does this project affect the inlet in my yard? So because this is a very specific project for that property, that would be, we can follow up and address that specific question.
Yes, I believe that was Amy who asked that. Please send me, again, I'm Allison Mannion, the 3rd email address listed on the slide. Send me an email and I'm happy to answer that question, or give me a call and I'm happy to answer that question. As well as any questions that, if anyone else does has questions that they want to ask, but not necessarily in this format, please, again, feel free to contact one of us with questions. And I think that's it. If there are no more questions, I can go ahead and conclude this meeting. And again, a recording will be made available. And any follow-up questions that you have, you are certainly able to ask one of us. And with that, I will go ahead and end this meeting.